Hello everyone, this is Breaking Brian. We're back with another deep dive for The Walking Dead. This is going to talk about things that are and are not from the comics. So the episode starts out with an original scene of a Michael Bay style shot of Amy walking around the camp with a bucket carrying a few mushrooms. In the comics, the survivors never eat from the forest, minus some rabbit and deer hunting, so this adds a nice touch of more realism. Gotta eat off the land. Amy asks how they will be able to tell if they're poisonous or not. Lori says Shane knows and takes the bucket to find him and more mushrooms. She asks Dale to watch Carl for her, and Carl must be super pissed off his mother didn't ask the hot blonde right next to them to babysit him instead. Come on, Lori, throw him a freaking bone. Lori goes outside in the woods all alone. Yeah, it's as stupid as it sounds and looks. She can get attacked at any moment by a walker or raider. In the comic, the characters usually go in groups. Lori picks up a few mushrooms and buckets them, but she hears branches snapping and is a little alarmed. She tries to walk when a man grabs her mouth and shoves her to the ground. We actually see that it is Shane, and apparently this was pre-planned. Shane and Lori each left the camp at different times to avoid suspicion that they were together. They didn't want anyone to know. So yeah, Shane, the ladies' expert man, shows that to get women, you have to lure them into the woods, stalk them, and then shove their face and body against the ground so they can't scream. Great advice from a former police officer. Anyways, Shane and Lori are about to have sex when she hesitates because she remembers and sees her ring wrapped in her necklace. She's thinking of Rick. She puts the necklace and ring to the side and bumps uglies with Shane. Lori, putting her wedding ring aside for Rick, is symbolic of her moving on from Rick. Now, fun fact, this is actually where Judith was conceived. In the comics, Judith is conceived the night the military destroys Atlanta. So yeah, Judith is conceived here, no doubt about it. The only thing Shane ever pulls out well is his shotgun. So back in Atlanta, Rick is still stuck in a tank, but grabs the radio and talks to Glenn. He asks for help, and Glenn tells Rick to make a run for it as the walkers are going back to eating the horse. He asks Rick if he has any ammo on him, and Rick takes the Beretta 92FS from the dead walker soldier that's fully loaded, and even takes a grenade that was right next to his dead body. It's hilarious as Rick fired his Colt Python not far from where the grenade was, so yeah, Rick nearly blew himself up inside the tank. Last episode. Now, most of this episode is not at all similar to the comics. It's mostly original to the show. It's mostly based on issue 2 and 4. But it is similar to issue 4 when Rick and Glenn go back into Atlanta for more guns. Rick finds a tiny weird shovel inside the tank and runs out. A walker is about to get him, but Rick smacks him in the face, knocking him away. Rick tries and fails to do a superhero landing and hurts his leg. He gets back up and runs while firing his gun. He kills a whole bunch of zombies until he comes across Glenn. Rick nearly shoots him as Glenn shouts he's not dead. So this is the part from the comic where Glenn takes Rick quietly out of the city, but here in the show they extended much more. Rick uses the last of his ammo to kill zombies in the alleyway and climbs the ladder with Glenn. They climb up the ladder all the way to a railing and they catch their breaths. They introduce themselves and Rick puts his empty gun in Glenn's bag. After that, Glenn and Rick see a walker in the herd trying to climb up the ladder. Rick and Glenn cut through the building and arrive at a cut-off alleyway. Suddenly, we see two big guys wearing black hockey armor, wielding baseball bats, and they show up and bash the zombies, blocking Rick and Glenn's path. Now, these guys are T-Dog and Morales, two original characters not from the comic at all, although Morales is a remixed version of Alan, and T-Dog was a precursor to Tyrese. So one thing to point out is that they're wearing bite-proof hockey armor, and this is similar to the outfits that the characters wore in the prison. The characters, after All Out War in the comics, wear hockey armor for their patrolmen and soldiers, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. Also, for some reason, the characters using this valuable armor after the scene, they just stop. So yeah, it's very stupid as the hockey armor is very practical and valuable, and they should keep it on full time, but they don't after this one scene. It is a massive head scratcher as hockey armor like this is worth more than gold. After everyone gets inside, all of a sudden Rick is shoved and held at gunpoint by Andrea. Now in the comics, Rick meets Andrea back in the Atlanta camp after reuniting with his family. So yeah, they don't meet like this. Also, in the comics, Andrea and Amy are nearly twins, only 1 year apart, where Andrea in the show is 12 whole years older than Amy, making her 36. Andrea is mad that Rick alerted the walkers to them, but technically he didn't. Yes, he shot up the streets to get to Glenn, but that was on the other side of the building, and Glenn and him went for a while on the roofs. So, yeah, this is honestly probably just a coincidence. Morales shows Rick how they're trapped now with the walkers who are coming in. So here we see a walker is actually a few using rocks to break down the glass doors. This has never happened at this point in the comics, so yeah, the show is definitely implying that the walkers are not brain dead stupid like most people. They have some kind of intelligence to them, as the walkers with the rocks knew that they could break down the doors faster using a rock instead of their own hands like the others. Rick tells them he was trying to find the helicopter, but they don't believe him. Perhaps everyone was inside or they were too low to hear it? Not really sure how they couldn't hear it. Suddenly, they hear some shots on the roof, and Merle fires some rounds from his rifle, and here we get to see Merle Dixon, a 100% original character for the show. Now, fun fact, when Michael Rooker was filming the scene with Merle, actual SWAT and police were called in real life because people far away saw a man on the roof with a gun. They had no idea AMC and Michael Rooker were filming. So Merle kills a few zombies down the streets with his rifle, and everyone shows up on the roof to berate him for his recklessness. Morales and T-Dog tell Merle that he's wasting bullets they don't have, and they have enough dead to worry about as it is. But Merle is not bothered by this, and Merle makes a few racist remarks and even calls T-Dog the N-word. So yeah, all of this is completely original to the show, obviously, as most of the cast here are non-comic characters. So besides being a huge racist, there's a few theories about Merle. For example, Merle is not just a huge jerk and a racist, but an old man suffering from extreme PTSD. He was in the Iraq War and even went to prison for an unknown amount of years. So after that racist remark, T-Dog throws a punch at Merle, but T-Dog's weak shorts are ineffective, and Merle beats the absolute crap out of T-Dog. He hits Rick, and Rick is knocked out, falling over a pipe that was on the roof. Morales literally does nothing for a while, and only takes a shot in the gut, and then just pussies out for the rest of the fight. So, like I said, Merle is probably doing this because of his PTSD from his time in prison, as he tells everyone that he's the boss now, like they do in prisons. Suddenly, Rick headbutts Merle with his rifle and knocks him out. Rick then handcuffs him to the pipe on the roof. Rick puts Merle in his place, that it's them and the dead now, no more racist slurs, nothing, no more crap from the old world. Merle disrespects him, and Rick aims his gun at Merle's head, saying the same thing Merle told everyone earlier about being polite to a man with a gun, as it's only common sense. Rick then realizes Merle is high on some kind of meth or coke, and takes a small vial from his pocket, and then throws it off the roof, pissing off Merle. Now in the comic, Rick doesn't point a gun at another living person after the apocalypse until issue 7, where he accidentally points it at Tyrese, and later issue 9 with Otis. So Rick and Morales talk, and Morales welcomes Rick into the big city as we see the streets are full of zombies. T-Dog tries the radio for everyone back at the Atlanta camp, but there's no signal like Merle's brain, as he says, so Merle flips him off. Merle also then tries to flirt with Andrea, but she says she would rather die than be with him. I think all of us would. Rick then asks if they can get out of the city from the sewers, and Glenn looks in the alleyway if there's any manhole covers they can use. There aren't any, unfortunately, but Jackie then suggests they can look in the basement. She tells them there should be an old emergency sewer pathway in this building, as it is old. She reveals that she knows this because she worked in the city's zoning offices. They go to the basement and look. They decide Glenn is going to go down there, and Glenn says he only wants Morales to go with him as Rick and Andrea have the guns, so they should watch the front doors. He doesn't want a big group blocking or slowing him down. Back in the front of the store, Rick and Andrea talk. She's still kind of mad that Rick put him in the situation, but accepts his help to get them all out. Rick tells Andrea that the gun she pulled on him earlier had its safety on. He turns it off, saying that when the red dot is on, that means it's ready to fire. Now in the comics, Andrea is way more competent with guns. On the roof, Merle pretends to be nice and asks T-Dog to free him from the handcuffs, but T-Dog doesn't fall for it. Now in the sewers, Glenn and Morales find that the tunnel is blocked by a giant grate and they won't be able to get through it. They also see a walker on the other side of it eating a rat. Back in the store, Andrea is looking at a mermaid necklace and wants to give it to her sister Amy for her birthday. She reveals to Rick that Amy loves fantasy stuff like unicorns and mermaids and asks Rick if it would technically still be stealing. Considering that 99% of the human race is dead now, no, it's not stealing, and Rick agrees. She takes it, but the walkers break down the first set of the strong glass doors and start banging on the second set. The survivors arrive and tell Rick that the sewers won't work and they need to find a way out soon. On the roof, Rick sees a construction van and thinks they can escape that way, but they need to get past all the dead first. They start coming up with a plan as Rick asks if they can somehow distract the dead. After Rick tells how the zombies are able to smell them so that they can eat them, Rick gets an idea. Wearing lab coats, Rick and Morales grab a dead zombie's body and drag it inside. Now, we get the first ever gut scene or walker camouflage in the show here. Now in the comics this happens much differently. In the comics, a day after reuniting with his family, Rick tells Glenn that they need more guns, and Glenn says that they'll both never make it that deep in the city to the gun store. Rick uses his hatchet and chops up a zombie in issue 4 for him and Glenn to make it to the gun store. So basically in the comics, the guts trick is used to get into Atlanta, while in the show it's to help them get out of it. So we have Rick about to chop up the zombie, but he stops and looks in his pockets. He finds a wallet and mentions the walker's name was Wayne Dunlap. He had a woman in his life named Rachel, and Rick says if he finds his family, he will tell them about Wayne. Rick breaks his word and never does this. Also, Glenn mentions that Wayne was an organ donor, which adds to the irony of the situation. Anyways, Rick starts chopping and everyone cringes at the gore. It's smelly, ugly, vile, and disgusting. Rick tells everyone to not get any walker blood in their eyes or skin, and this is very important and smart, as walker blood entering a person's bloodstream will definitely kill them. Well, until later seasons when it doesn't, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. Now, they all have gloves and thick clothing on, which is good, but they should all really have eye protection and masks as well. One mask that Rick had and then he gave to Morales just simply isn't enough. After that, they smear the guts on them. Only Rick and Glenn are getting the guts on them while the others are just putting it on them. Glenn throws up like he does in the comics, and Andrea also gives Glenn her gun just in case. And also Rick tosses the key to Merle's handcuffs to T-Dog just in case anything happens. He could have just handed them to him, but I guess he thinks throwing is cooler. So even though Rick and Glenn have guts on them, Rick takes the axe and says that they need more guts. So after putting more guts on them, Rick and Glenn go outside to the alleyway and test the walker camouflage on the walkers there. The guts trick seems to work. The walkers do look at them very strangely though, because walkers use smell, sight, and sound to differentiate between alive and dead. So like in the comics, Rick and Glenn are very nervous as they walk through the walker-infested streets. This is mostly based on issue 4. On the roof, Morales, Andrea, and Jackie watch on. Rain is slowly coming in, like in the comics. Merle gets upset and scared because he assumes Rick has the keys on him, but T-Dog reveals to Merle that he has them, probably giving Merle PTSD flashbacks of his time in prison. What other black guys? Back in the Atlanta camp, Dale says that the hose for the RV isn't long for the world, and they will need a replacement soon, and doesn't know where to find one, as James is helping him. Amy is pacing back and forth and is very worried, saying that the group should have arrived back by now. We see some of the Atlanta survivors that weren't from the comics setting up camp and doing various chores. Lori is doing laundry and watching Shane teaching Carl how to pull out some kind of knot. As I mentioned in the previous review, Shane in his short run in the comics never acted as a father figure or surrogate uncle to Carl. Suddenly, Shane hears the voice on the radio as they all look, as T-Dog tells them they're trapped in Atlanta. T-Dog even asks if he's speaking to Shane. This is actually very good writing, as Rick is in the street and didn't hear this, making him have no idea that Shane, and by extension Lori and Carl, are alive. Everyone is worried, and Shane tells Lori and everyone else there that there's nothing they can do. Now, here we see the kind of leader that Shane is, an every man and woman for themselves kind of attitude. One wolf goes missing, the pack leaves them behind. This is actually what deers do. When they're running from a pack of wolves or predators, they leave the weakest behind. Amy is upset as Andrea was a part of the group that's trapped and she wanted to help them all. Shane tells her that she's got to let them go and there's nothing they can do for them. Now, while this was the correct action as Rick helps everyone get out anyways, there's a really simple way to fix this. Shane could take Amy, Jim, and a few others to cause a distraction in the city to free them, but Amy gets mad, saying Andrea is her sister, and storms off. Shane watches Amy leave in her nice white pants. Even Jim looks. Lori sees it and gets mad at Shane, confirming he's definitely sleeping in the doghouse tonight. Now, back in the city, Glenn and Rick are walking through the zombie-infested streets, and he is nearly caught by a zombie, but he manages to fool it by growling like a walker. Suddenly, on the roof, it starts to rain, and the guts on Rick and Glenn are starting to wash off of them now. Now, this also happens in the comics in issue 4 after they get the guns from the store. The walkers smell them as a live prey and attack them. Here in the show, the walkers are beginning to growl louder at them, and Glenn panics as the walkers aren't being able to tell, and he tells Rick that it's not going to work anymore. A walker screams and runs to Rick, and Rick kills it with the axe and shouts for Glenn to run. Now, in the comics, Rick actually gets bitten here, or technically. A walker does bite his shoulder and rips off part of his jacket, but luckily the walker didn't bite deep enough to actually break the skin, which means Rick lived. Rick and Glenn are running, and as they run through the rain, they kill any walkers blocking their path. In the comics, Rick dual wields an axe and pistol as Glenn pushes the shopping cart full of guns in the rain. Rick and Glenn throw their weapons over the fence and jump over it and discard their guts-covered lab coats. Rick then uses Andrea's gun to shoot at the walkers by the fence, while Glenn gets the truck keys from the box. Now, how Rick was able to get the gun when Glenn was the one who had it given to him by Andrea is unknown. Anyway, some of the walkers do climb the fence. A single smart walker fully climbs the fence and chases after them. Rick and Glenn get inside the construction van and drive out of there as the walkers break down the fence. Back on the roof, Andrea, Morales, and Jackie worry that Glenn and Rick are leaving them behind. Rick tells Glenn that they're going to need to radio the others after they clear the dead. Glenn asks how they're going to be able to do that, and Rick breaks into a race car and somehow hotwires it with a screwdriver. Now, in the comics, Glenn was actually the only person in the group who knew how to hotwire cars, because he used to steal them a few before the outbreak to pay off bills and debt that he had. So anyways, Glenn drives back into the city with his alarm blasting and radios everyone to get ready soon. Back in the building, everyone in the group pick up their bags and leaves, minus Merle, who is still handcuffed to the pipe. He begs them not to leave him behind, but they do anyways. Morales even tells T-Dog that they have to go, but T-Dog tries to get Merle. T-Dog decides he can't leave Merle to die, and stupidly tries to carry the tools with him to free Merle, even though he doesn't have to. And then T-Dog pulls one of the biggest blunders in TV history, dropping the handcuff key down the tiny floor drain pipe on the roof. Back downstairs, the zombies are going crazy and are about to break down the glass any minute now. Merle rightfully yells at T-Dog for being the dumbest black guy in TV history, and T-Dog leaves him and the tools behind. He chains up the door last minute on the roof and runs downstairs. Morales, Andrea, and Jackie run to the back door and try to open the truck door gates. I used to work at a Publix, so these chains are very accurate. They hear Glenn's alarm car going as his car drives through the city, drawing all the zombies towards him. Glenn stops the car and waits for them to get a little closer before he drives off again. Now in the comics, Glenn never drives a car into Atlanta to distract zombies. Back in the store, T-Dog is running, and the zombies finally break through the glass and enter the store. He and his shorts make a run for it to the back as Rick reverses and parks the truck by the gate. The zombies completely flood the department store as T-Dog reunites with the others. Rick hits the door, and everyone panics to quickly open the door as soon as possible. They throw their bags in the van, really curious what's in them. Like, honestly, what was worth coming into the city in the first place? Anyways, Rick gets in the driver's seat and takes the wheel. The walkers arrive and nearly get them, but everyone gets inside. Rick drives off, and Morales closes the door. They drive out of the area, and on the roof, Merle keeps trying to break free, but can't. He could get free if he just dislocated his thumb and slipped through the cuffs, but he's not thinking of that. After they all leave him for dead, Rick notices that indeed Merle is not here with them, and keeps driving. Everyone is in shock, and they look at T-Dog like he's the dumbest person in the van. Because, well, he is. And T-Dog tells them how he dropped the key. Andrea looks around and asks where Glenn is. Outside the city, we see the iconic shot from the last episode of The Highway as Glenn drives and speeds down the open highway of no cars. Glenn screams for fun as he feels more alive than ever here. He feels free. He feels unstoppable. He feels... And that's going to be it for my episode 2 review. See you guys next time on the review for episode 3.